So, welcome everybody to our post-election conversation on how women fared in the 2018 midterms, what happened, and then we're going to talk a little bit about what's next. We have two folks on for our presenters tonight. First, we have our president and founder, Ann Moses, who you all see here, and she's going to go over through the first beginning pieces of our slide deck, and then we have one of our alumni, Jocelyn Yao, who just recently won her seat for city council 48 hours ago, who will jump on with us too and share a little bit about her experience. And so, folks, we would love for you to chat with us here in the chat box, and then we're going to spend a little bit of time talking, answering questions in a few minutes. So, Anne, I will hand it over to you.
Hello, everyone. It is really nice to see you. I hope you all feel as relieved as I do that the election is over. And I'm psyched to present all this information and sort of summarizing what happened and then where we can go from here. And I'm very excited for you all to hear from Jocelyn. I'm quickly just going to kind of take you over like the history of where we started, very, very brief history, and where we've come and what happened in this election. So this first slide that you see shows where we are in 2016. This was right after the 2016 election. And you can see here that things weren't going so well. I also want to tell you this slide represented zero change from the previous two election cycles. So what we've got is that, as you can see, women made up just 20% of Congress, 25% of state legislatures, 12% of governors. That meant 6 out of 50 U.S. governors were women, and 22% of mayors of cities of over $30,000 people. And that's about 300 cities across the U.S. have cities that are larger than 30,000. And this slide shows you a little bit about who these women in office were. These stats are just for the women in Congress, but it's a pretty good proxy of how women were doing across the country. So you can see right after Trump got elected, we had of these 20% of women in Congress, 3 times as many of them were Democrats than Republicans. So of all the women in Congress, it was literally a 3-to-1 ratio of Democratic women to Republican women. 65% of these women were white, leaving 35% were women of color, which is a dramatic underrepresentation of what America looks like. And I think this photo here of the Senate, the entering Senate class of 2016.
Anne, I hate to interrupt you, but our folks cannot hear you. Can we try the headphones? It sounds like you're going in and out a little bit, so we just want to make sure we can hear you.
Okay, let me. How is that? Is it better?
Okay, folks, can you give us some feedback?
Is that better?
Okay, folks, can you give us some feedback?
Someone tell us. That is great. Excellent.
Excellent. Okay. Thank you, Debbie.
Should I start over?
Thank you.
Okay, I'm just going to quickly start over, which is where we started in 2016. You can see the rates weren't very good, but I'm going to summarize that very fast. And this is, again, right after Trump was elected. And so these women in office, for every 3 Democratic women in Congress, there was just 1 Republican woman. So the numbers are low, but the numbers of Republican women are dramatically lower than the numbers of Democratic women. And you can see that the racial representation, it was most of these women were white. About 65% of these women were white. And then, a pretty dramatic underrepresentation of women of color relative to the country in Congress. And as I said earlier, these numbers here are about Congress, but really you can extrapolate them all the way down. Women, there are 3 times as many Democratic women in office across the country, and a dramatic underrepresentation of women of color as well. So then we had the election of Donald Trump, and this happened. We had massive women's marches across the country, the world, which I'm sure many of you participated in. We had the March for Our Lives, led by all the incredible young women activists and young men activists, but really a lot of the women were pretty prominent. And then More recently, we had the Kavanaugh hearings and the incredible protests and outrage across the country of women who are pretty upset about that. Uh, all of which brings us to today. So here is what happened a couple days ago. We had an election, and the number of women in Congress grew. It's a jump right now. We're still counting. There's still some races that are hanging out there, but the number of women in Congress who had been there after 2016 was 107, and it jumped up to 123, and probably a few more are going to be added in the coming weeks. Um, so that's a great jump, but I just want to note that it's pretty incremental. We went from Congress being 20% Congress are women to today 23% of Congress is made up of women. Governors, likewise, uh, we did take a jump. We're still waiting for one more governor's race where a woman could potentially win, but we did jump from 6 female governors in 2016 to 9 or possibly 10 in 2018. And the numbers for state legislators and big city mayors we're still waiting for those counts. It's taking a long time to count. So the next slide. I want to talk a little bit about this because of the demographic breakdown is really, so the gains in Congress this year that were made by women, they were largely made by women of color, which is incredible. I mean, these numbers are tiny. And remember, we only have 535 members of Congress, of House and Senate together, but we added at least 3 Black women, at least 1 or 2 Latina women. There are 2 Native American women elected to Congress for the very first time, 2 Muslim American women elected to Congress for the very first time, and then of course we elected some white women as well. Um, Actually, I'm going to go back a bit. I didn't include this here, but remember I told you earlier that the proportion of women in Congress, of Democratic women to Republican women, prior to this election was 3 to 1. Well, after this election, the proportion of Democratic women to Republican women in Congress is 5 to 1. So what that means is all the gains, literally almost all the gains in this election cycle for women in Congress were made on the Democratic side. And in fact, Republican women actually lost seats this year. And even if you identify as a Democrat, I will tell you, I find pretty chilling, because if we need women to collaborate with each other across the aisle, that means we need women on both sides of the aisle. So I want to talk a little bit about some candidates to exemplify what happened this year. These are all Democratic women. They're all on the left, but that's where the gains were made. The first 2, I'm sure you recognize, there's been a lot of conversation about them. Oops. The first 2, Alexandria Cortez Ocasio, and Ayanna Pressley. These women were in highly Democratic districts, and they actually ran in the primaries against the incumbents. And in both their cases, the incumbents were both middle-aged white guys. And they'd been sitting in Congress representing their home districts for, 14, 20 years. And these women did kind of the unheard of things that they challenged the Democratic incumbent and they won. And they won by registering and turning out new voters, people who are from their communities who had historically not voted because frankly they were unmotivated by the candidates, right? So they totally throw out the like old nickel playbook and they said, nope, we want people who represent our communities. We're going to go out, we're going to register new voters, we're going to talk to people who usually don't vote, and we're going to get them to vote for us. And then they won, and they won in their primaries. And then because those districts are so clearly, gerrymandered to be Democratic districts, they didn't really even have a challenger in the general. The third lady, Rashida Tlaib, ran to replace a former congressman who was retired because of sexual harassment issues. And likewise, she competed in a very stiff Democratic primary because it was a Democratic district to beat a number of people, but one of whom was a middle-aged white guy who was the mayor of Detroit. And so once she cleared that primary, she too sailed through the general and is now going to Congress. So I guess I want to talk about this because what we're seeing here is that there is this new American majority of voters at play. And these are folks that, frankly, the political establishment has written off as people who are ever going to get involved and ever going to get engaged in campaigns and ever going to vote and turn out.
And voters are really, really excited by candidates who are authentically from their communities. And what we've seen this year is that they are going to get out and they're going to vote for these candidates, and these candidates can win. Um, so I think that is a great moment to hand it over to Jocelyn Yao, Ignite alumna, who moved home to our hometown of Eastvale, California, and ran for city council and won. And I'm going to let her tell you how she did that. Jocelyn, are you there?
See, Jocelyn.
Jocelyn, you may have to unmute yourself. There she is. I see her.
You see me? Okay, can you hear me?
Yes. Hi, Jocelyn.
Oh, hi. Okay, perfect. This is my first time using this. So,
Maybe we could get you on screen.
um, well, thank you for having me. First of all, thank you for having me here. Um, I it's been quite an experience. For let me do a little
Speak up, Jocelyn.
Can you hear me?
You got to speak up much louder.
Okay. How about this? Is this better?
Much
Okay,
better.
perfect. So let me introduce myself. First of all, I originally from NorCal, Northern California, and then I moved to Malaysia when I was still a baby. Then I moved back here and I settled in Eastville when I was 16 years old. And then I went through college here and then transferred to Berkeley. And after that, worked in California State Senate for less than a year and then was scooped over by Pelosi's office. And I served as a field representative for House Democratic leader, soon to be Speaker, Nancy Pelosi. And I was her field rep, and then I served as her immigration specialist. And I moved back home and I was working on my master's. I still am working on my master's in government. And it just so happened that this came up that, the current council member decided not to seek re-election. And I was like, why not? I was like, why not? Why not me? Let's do this. And initially, the number still hasn't changed, but so as you probably know from working for Pelosi, I am a Democrat, and my district is one of the most conservative districts in my city. We have district elections. The numbers were not in my favor at all. In fact, if you look at the numbers, I thought I was gonna lose. Nobody thought I was gonna win. I looked at the number, I broke down everything by race, by gender, by party affiliation. I did everything, no matter, regardless of how I mixed and matched my number, the number just did not add up. And and so I was so on top of my head, I was like, what am I getting myself into? Um, Give me a second. 好不好？好不好？关关关关关掉。And so I was on the phone with my friend. I was on the phone with my friend, and he said this. He gave me a really good advice, which is that just walk, just go door knocking, just go knock on doors, talk to people, and that's exactly what I did. I ran against someone who was backed by all the city council members, backed by basically everyone in the city, in the region, and but what I did was that I just knocked on door every single day for the past 4 months. I just kept knocking on doors. I knocked on both Republican, Democrats, young, seniors, doesn't matter. I was knocking on every single door, and it was rough because of my work history. So I was constantly attacked. Based on my work history, but I went out anyway, and I focused on my message. I kept telling people this is about local issue and it's not about work history. Pelosi is not running here. I'm running here, and my name is Jocelyn Yao. And so I kept doing that, and I knocked on all the houses 3 times. That's how many. That's I went around 3 times, 3 rounds, and I also did phone banking, and I also wrote personalized postcards as a follow up, and we also did text banking. So we sent text messages to young voters, and also because of me being an Asian, I did target specifically on API community. When the ballot dropped, we went around and we collected their ballots, and so we did that. So that's why if you look at the number, my initial number vote by mail when it came in, I killed it. I had 75% of the votes right off the bat, and the number did drop a little bit, but at the end of the day, I won by 68% of the vote. So it's possible, and this is not just this is not just for Democrats candidate or Republican candidates. It's the tactic. It's being out there. It's being out there talking to people, connecting with voters, and stay true to your message. Do not It was so frustrating. There were times when, if of course, if you get attacked, you want to fight back, but you do not. You want to stay positive. You want people, because the truth is, with everything that is going on nationally, people are sick and tired of all the negative news, all the negative energy. So you want to bring something positive for them. And that's what I did, and here we are.
I have to say I'm so glad we had you on this call, Jocelyn. I wish we could see your face because it's so exciting. That's exactly the advice I would have given you. It's one thing to run against someone theoretically, it's another to have a person at your door saying, hey, this is who I am and this is what I believe in. And these are the issues I care about. And what do you care about? And let me tell you how I'm going to represent you. It's really about people. And, for many of you all on the call, your first race isn't going to be for Congress. It's going to be city council or a state legislative seat in your community. And you're going to have to do that. And you can see that even if you're in a different community, you can win. Um, so before we take questions, I want to just talk a tiny bit about voting because I think that's really important in the voter stats. And so one of the things I want to let you all know is that women do in fact vote at higher rates than men. So in every presidential election since 1980, the proportion of eligible women who voted, meaning women who are 18 years old and citizens who can vote, has exceeded the proportion of men who voted by about 6 to 7%, right? And this is true for every age group. In the 18 to 24 age group, 7% more women vote than men, all the way up, except the only group for whom this is an exception is older people. So people who are 65 and older, the men voted higher rates than women. A few other things. So young voters typically vote Democrat. Their young female voters are skewing left. That doesn't mean all of them are, but there is a skew that we're seeing in this country. And then something else, which I'm sure you've all heard discussed recently, but in midterm elections, the proportion of all voters in this country plummets. And so you can see in this first slide here, 2014 numbers. The pink is women, young women. So these are 18 to 24-year-olds. 18% of 18 to 24-year-old women voted in the last midterm election and 15% of 18 to 24-year-old men. And then in 2016, the numbers still aren't great, but 46% of young women voted in the 2016 presidential election and 40 as compared to 40% of young men. We don't yet have the numbers for the voting stats for this last election on Tuesday. But this bar chart here with a 41.9%. So in 2014, that is the number of people, the percentage of eligible people who voted. So just under 42%. And in 2018, it's looking like that's closer to 50, and it may even be higher. And the preliminary results are showing that young people did in fact vote in these midterms at much higher rates than ever before, that all people did. So I just want to, kind of close on this before we take questions, but where do we go from here? So at Ignite, we're obviously always asking what this means for young women, and here's really the trends that we're seeing. So young women came into this 2018 election super fired up and ready to, as registering voters and mobilizing voters and volunteering on campaigns and even running for office and just doing everything they possibly could and protesting and heading out. So we see that trend is going to continue. Our young women are really even more motivated by some of the successes they've seen, especially with these younger candidates and candidates of color, these women of color running and winning, that I think people are going to stay on the gas. And I think young people in particular are going to stay on the gas. I think we're going to see many, many more young women voting. We just did an online poll yesterday of 2,000 of our alumni, and 900 of them so 900 of them responded, and 98% of them said that they voted, which is massive, right? So we want to stay on the gas with that and make sure all our Ignite young women vote, and that for any of you who are on the call who are talking to other young women, you get them to. And then the last thing I'll say is that we think, we had a bunch of running earlier than I ever would have thought. Women like Jocelyn and this woman here, this last picture on the right is one of our Ignite alumni, Maya Whitaker, who ran for District 6 City Council in Oakland. She tried to take out an incumbent. She's a young woman. She raised some money, but it was hard. And the winner of that race raised 5 times as much money as she did. And yet in a field of 7, Maya came in 3rd. And she did that by actually going out and using the same playbook that Jocelyn talked about and that I was talking about with all these congressional candidates. And she registered young voters and voters of color who never voted before. And that's why she did so well. I mean, she mobilized, hundreds upon hundreds upon hundreds of new voters in that district. And when she runs again, that will help her. So I think I'm going to close there on that pretty optimistic note and take questions. Jocelyn and I can both take questions.
Okay, so our first question is, now that the races are over, how can we continue to empower voters and protect democracy?
I think I just to empower voters. Elections happen every 2 years, but that doesn't mean the work should only start up around election time. You can be registering voters tomorrow. You can be registering voters year round. You can be talking to your peers year round about getting engaged and getting prepared. 2020 is going to be another presidential year, and it's going to be crazy. I think we can all assume it's going to be crazy. So I would say don't wait until 4 months before the election to start doing the work now. And wherever you are in your home communities, you should be the one talking to your, friends and neighbors and the folks in your community about getting engaged and getting them engaged. Like, get them registered to vote tomorrow so that it doesn't have to be this big fire drill come the election. Jocelyn, I don't know if you have anything to add.
You said exactly what I was thinking. Start registering people to vote. That is so important. In fact, you should start tomorrow instead of wait till the year of election. And because then, trust me, once the election starts, you have like 10 million other things to worry about. And it will be great if you can get that not necessarily out of the way, but at least register as many people as possible before you head into election year.
Yep.
Okay. How can we get more younger women like Cortez to run for Congress?
I think that's God bless her, she stepped out of line. Nobody asked that woman to run. In fact, the party establishment asked her not to. And so, I think there's something to be said for knowing, like Jocelyn talked about, knowing her district and looking at the numbers and saying, oh my God, I'm not a match for this district. All the voters are Republican and I'm a Democrat. And, this isn't really my district. And I think with Congress, it's hard if you're not a match, right? Like if a district voted, by 30 points for Hillary Clinton, and you're a Republican, it's going to be tougher to get elected. So part of it is, knowing if you're a match, but part of it is like, I can't say this in, like, if there was ever a moment to step out of line for all of you on the call, this is the moment. Really. I don't know, Jocelyn, if you have anything to add.
I absolutely agree with you. In fact, as much as I want to tell people to run, like I've had people reaching out to me saying, "Oh, I'm gonna run for assembly. I want to run against an incumbent who's a Democrat." Um, and I look at the numbers, I look at the candidate, I look at the incumbent, and I said, I would love for you, but sometimes for larger race, especially for congressional race, you do have to look if it matches. I hate to say this because that's the reality. With Julia Peacock, not sure if anyone heard of her, but she is running in my district against Ken Calvert, Congressman Ken Calvert, who is absolutely horrible. My congressman is one of the most corrupted congress member in the entire country, and Julia Peacock walked. They all walked. They mobilized. They did everything, but it was not even close. Simply because it was really just not a match. But she did everything. She really did. They marched, they walked, they wrote, they called, they text, they did everything. And sometimes it's not a match. And in Alexandra case, I was watching her race. In Alex, that is a match. In fact, we should have her. I do think so. We should have her instead of I'm blanking on what's the name. Um, anyway, instead of the previous member of Congress.
Not Joe Crowley, it's the other guy. I want to beat
Yeah.
the other guy.
The point being, sometimes it really it comes down to this match. But for nonpartisan races, it's a little bit easier. Like for my case, it was not a match, but I knew it was a nonpartisan race, and I tried to focus on the issue. But
Can you speak up, Jocelyn?
yes, yeah, but I hate it's just for congressional races, it's a little bit different. It really is.
Yeah, and you all, I mean, I'm going to assume that many of you on the phone, like, I do think the match thing that she's talking about, that we both discussed, is it becomes a bigger issue for congressional races where the money is huge and the stakes are a lot higher, right? But for your city council race, I mean, for these local races, they are nonpartisan. You don't even need to declare your political affiliation. The only reason they knew Jocelyn's was because she worked for Nancy Pelosi, right? So it's really about face-to-face door knocking, talking to people, and working hard. It's door knocking. It's going around and taking your lists and knocking on every door and meeting people and saying, hi, I'm Ann and I'm running for office, and what are the issues you care about, and let me tell you about the issues I'm thinking of. And right, it's and making that personal contact. The match won't be as important.
So we're gonna go to our next question, and we're gonna try something. Could you mute yourself? Because there's a little bit of an echo on mine and Jocelyn's end. So, oh look, it's disappeared. Fabulous. Jocelyn, I'm gonna have you take this next question. How can women like Joanny Perez, with no political experience, run in the next election? And does she have time and opportunity to campaign for other candidates in order to get campaign experience now?
I would politely disagree with you. I do not think that you do not have any political experience. The fact that you're on this call means that you're getting that experience right now. So it's not, it's you can't just wake up one day. I mean, I guess you could, but realistically speaking, it's harder to just wake up one day and say, I'm gonna run today. It does not work that way. I'll tell you my personal story. I
Jocelyn, can you speak up just a little bit more? I think
Yes.
the echoing's gone, but now I'd love to. I'm getting some feedback that it's still a little bit low on your end.
Let me try. Is this
Thank
better?
you.
Is this better?
Oh, that's so much better for me. Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Okay, so the fact that you're on this call, the fact that you're part of Ignite, I think you're prepping up for it already. When I was in college, I was in student government. Trust me, I did not think of running for city council. It was never on my mind. I joined student government. I volunteer as just volunteering around and helping out. And then from there, my friend referred me to an internship, which turned out to be Nancy Pelosi's office. And I took it, not really knowing what I was getting myself into. And then after that, somehow I got connected to Sarah, and then got into Ignite. And then that's when I was like, okay, you know what? I think I'll give it a thought. And so I signed up for Emerge, which is another program for but that one is specifically for only Democrat candidates. So I signed up for that, and I completed the program. I graduated from Emerge, graduated from college, done with Ignite, and I started working, and it didn't really cross my mind. I mean, it was at the back of my mind, but it was definitely not something that like I wake up every day be like, yes, I'm gonna run for office. Um, and and it just so happened that when the council member decided not to seek re-election, I was like, okay, now I'm ready to run. So to everyone out there, just keep doing what you have been doing. Get involved in the community, volunteer, be out there, talk to people, get to know the issues. Um, and then who knows when that opportunity presents, then you're ready for it. Because what I'm realizing is that it's very frustrating to see that when that chance or that opportunity comes up, but then someone is not ready for it. You want to be ready for it. You want to, by getting involved in Ignite and so on, get ready for it because you never know. You never know when it will come up. And when it does, then you'll be ready.
Yeah. Opportunity knocks all the time, doesn't it, Jocelyn?
It really does.
Um,
You'll be surprised.
yeah, seriously. So the next call, actually, I'm going to turn right to you. It's from Andrea in Minneapolis, and she believes that demographics have helped all these amazing women get elected. In and then she wants to know how can we support more women who are running in incredibly conservative spaces filled with older white men run for office and get elected. So she Andrea is from a community similar to, I think, the Inland Empire, Jocelyn, and really trying to figure out how can we support these folks in rural areas.
I would say, well, if you have the financial ability, money plays a big role. It's very helpful when you're campaigning. But more importantly, volunteering, being out there walking. It does not matter if they are older white men or, it does not matter. The fact is, it's the personal touch that matters. In fact, they love it when I go knock on their doors. Republicans love it. They love talking to me. We were, in fact, the night before election, I was on the phone with this old couple for half an hour, which you probably should not do that, but I just couldn't get them off the phone. Um, it's the personal touch matters. And also if you're far away and you cannot be there physically, so some of my friends from Pelosi's office up in San Francisco, they phone banked for me from San Francisco. I had a group of them calling every weekend, helping me make phone calls, and I made sure they created Google Voice numbers simply because I don't want that San Francisco area code. But they did that. They were phone banking for me, and then for some of my other friends who might be a little bit shy, did not really want to talk to people, or and they're not in politics. I had them send text message. I literally sent them a draft, and I said just copy and paste it and send it to this group of people, and he did. So there are many ways to help out, and no matter where you are, you can always help out. But if you're right there, if you're nearby, I cannot stress enough the importance of canvassing. That personal touch is really is everything, and that works for all age groups, all ethnicity, all races. It doesn't matter. Everyone wants that personal touch. And also, I want to emphasize, social media does not it works as a reminder to remind people, oh, like I remember talking to Jocelyn. I seen that name on Facebook. When they scroll through, they're like, oh yeah, I did talk to Jocelyn. But it does not change people's mind. You can it you can change people's mind by talking to them in person, face to face. But social media, it does not work. Don't get too caught up in it. Um, I know some people might disagree with me. Some people there are actually people who get paid to run social media for elected officials, but I just don't think it works as well as that personal touch. It's a good reminder, but it does not change people's mind. I don't think so.
Okay, we're going to go, thank you, Jocelyn. We're going to go to a fundraising question, and you can tee this one off, and then Jocelyn, if you have anything else to add from your campaign. So the question is, what are some innovative fundraising strategies that first-time female candidates can do to garner smaller dollar donations?
I mean, I would say before you even think about fundraising, the first thing you want to do is learn about what are the rules for fundraising in your district. So, are there, for instance, are there campaign limits? Like I was just referring to Maya Whitaker who ran in Oakland. There was an $800 campaign limit, right? So you can know as many of the gazillionaires but the most they can write a check for is 800 bucks. And that was good information for her because then she could decide, okay, how am I going to raise money and how am I going to raise it fast? Um, so I think before I even answer that question directly, the one thing I would say is it's important to know how much you need to raise. And then the very first thing you want to do, this I'm obsessed with fundraising for young and new candidates. So the very first thing you want to do is raise the easiest money first, right? So you don't want to do like a big cool party where everyone gives you $5. You want to literally call the 10 people in the world who love you more than anything, and you want to ask them to give you as much as they possibly can, right? Because the whole idea is that, first of all, you want to get money in the bank fast, but also you want to boost your own confidence first, right? So if you know that you're going to run for office and you're going to have to raise $10,000, then you want to actually get you want to get as much of it as you possibly can fast, and you want to have some quick successes so you feel really good. So at Ignite, we always do this exercise, in 90 seconds, think about the as many people in your life who love you, who just will do whatever you say. If you call them and say, I'm in the hospital at 4 a.m., they're in their car coming to the hospital, right? Who are those people and how much can you get from them? So then you kind of work it out from there. I mean, but I think the very first thing you do is got to call what we call get on the phone with, and I agree with what Jocelyn said. Don't send a long letter. Don't send a long email. Pick up the phone and call the people who love you and say, I'm doing this. You don't even need to tell them why because they love you, but explain to them why you're doing it and that you're passionate about it and ask them. Um, there's another incredibly cool resource I want to tell you all about, just so you don't get off the phone without knowing about it, but it's called CrowdPack, and there are other online things like it. So before you even think about running for office, before you've even filed, you can't really collect money until you've filed. But a lot of young people need a boost. Like they need to feel like, okay, this is going to be doable for me. And CrowdPack, if you go online, you can like set up a page for your candidacy in like 20 minutes. I kid you not. And then you can take pledges. So you can email out to all the people you know and love and who know and love you. And you can say, I'm going to office in 2020, right? The election was 2 days ago and the next election is in 2 years. But you can say, I'm going to run for office in 2020. Will you pledge some money? And the money doesn't switch hands. They make a pledge online, but you can start seeing the numbers go up. And then when you file your papers and actually have a bank account, you can press the button and have the money. The pledges convert to real money. And I think that's really awesome for young candidates to realize, like, oh my God, like people really are going to give me money. I've raised all this money in pledges. They really are going to support my candidacy. So I think that's kind of a great creative tool, I think, for young and new candidates, because it makes you feel like, okay, I can do this. It lets you put a toe in, and then have some positive feedback right away. But But answer to your question, I'm not a big like fundraising gimmick creative ideas person. Like the fastest way to raise money is to ask someone for money. And I know that's really, really hard, but you have to remember that if you're running for office, it's not because you want to go buy more shoes and purses. It's because you want to fight for your community on their behalf about the issues that matter to you. And you're asking for that. You're asking to represent their interests in government. And you should feel good and proud about that. And the more you ask, the more you'll get used to it. You'll get some yeses, that'll be great. You'll get some nos, and they won't sting so much. Oh, and look, someone said they made their crowd back today. I love that. I love you. That's awesome.
A few minutes left in our webinar. And so I'm sorry, we're not going to get to all of the questions, unfortunately, but we're going to take one more. And the question that we'll take, because I'm going to do them in order, or I know that. So the last question we're going to take is, what issues can we see new electeds taking up, and how will this change the current political conversation? Anne, do you want to take this, and then Jocelyn can close us up?
Sure. This candidate who's now a new member of Congress, Ayanna Pressley, she had a quote when she won, and it practically moved me to tears. But she said that the people closest to the pain should be closest to the power. And I just think that's, isn't that what our government is supposed to do? I'm represent and protect those of us who, need the most. I hope, I can't say for sure. Someone said, please repeat it. Ayanna said,
Oh, okay, perfect. Thank you.
sorry, Ayanna said the people closest to the pain should be closest to the power. And I really believe that that is what we're going to see from these new women in Congress is, a lot of move towards legislation that protects those among us who are hurting the most in this country. What's going to get done? I still think it's going to be very hard. We're still a country pretty divided. I think we saw this with this election. But it's why I want so many of you all and all these young women from Ignite to run, because the issues in our communities and our country are changing. And I think, we need to elect a new crop of people who are closest to what's actually happening on the ground. I'll let Jocelyn close it out.
Jocelyn, as a new elected, what do you think folks are taking on as issues, and how do you think it'll shift the political conversation?
She may be muted.
We'll give her a second. Thank you all so much for your engagement this evening.
Yeah,
I see that a few
and if you
folks
all
are
have
still. Oh, go ahead, Anne.
If you all have any questions, you are more than welcome to email them, and we'll answer them all.
Yeah. I don't, Jocelyn, do we have you back?
Can you hear me?
Yes. Can you speak a little louder?
Yes. Can you hear me better?
And then Anne, do you mind muting yourself? Thank you.
Okay, so I think for my case, it's a little bit different, as in, it is local. But I think the fact that I even got elected into this city council in the Inland Empire, I think that's already changing the conversation. That's already changing the landscape. A 23-year-old and quote unquote Pelosi them getting elected in the Inland Empire, it's a big deal. And my friend Jackie Casillas, I'm not the only one. My friend Jackie, she works for Planned Parenthood, and she just got elected to Corona City Council, another conservative
Wow.
city. And yes, and both of us, we ran against Jackie ran against a pastor, and I ran against someone whom he had God as one of his main, in fact, the first priority. So that to give you that context, that's what we were up against. But both of us won big. It was not even a close race. So I think the fact that we even ran and the fact that we won, that's already changing the landscape. And so this is Assembly District 60. We before this we only had 2 Democrat city council members and we doubled it to 4. We now have 4, and we are already planning for 2020. We are already looking for young women of color, progressive young women of color to run in 2020. We're going to double the number. That's our goal, to have 8 city council members by 2020. So it's hopefully hopefully we'll get that. But we are definitely changing the conversation, one election at a time, and we can do this.
Yes.
We can all do this together.
Well, Jocelyn, thank you so much. You truly epitomize the work that we're doing here at Ignite and what we're, setting the example for and what we're doing on the day-to-day. I know Anne's got to get herself to an event across town. Thank you, Anne, for all of your amazing vision and wisdom and sharing what is happening in our country. And we still have a lot of ballots to still count, folks, and a lot more races to still call. So we look forward to continuing to do this work with all of you and continuing this conversation. Have a good night.